Okay, so starting out, we have the same steps that we did back in 5.6. We are going to start by factoring the quadratic. Refer back to 5.6. We find two numbers that multiply to C and add to B. We can also think about multiplying to the last number and adding to the middle number. Once we figure out those numbers, we're going to write it in factored form like this. Then we have one more step. We're going to take it one step further with our problems we're doing today. We are going to then set each of those factors equal to 0 and solve both of them, which is going to give us both of our x-intercepts or both of our zeros. The reason why that works is because if this equals 0, what's 0 times anything? 0. If this equals 0, anything times 0 is 0. So once we get it factored out, our two possible times it's going to equal 0 is when either of our factors equals 0. So we're going to go through, we're going to factor just like we did in 5.6, and then we are going to set each factor equal to 0. So this first problem I've got here, x squared plus 7x plus 10, I need to find two numbers that multiply together to be 10, and they need to add together to be 7. What numbers multiply together to be 10 and add together to be 7? 5 and 2. I'm going to do 2 and 5 just because I like to put the smaller one first. So I'm going to put x plus 2 and x plus 5. So that is my factored version. From there, I still need to solve to find my zeros. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each of those factors, so x plus 2, I'm going to set that equal to 0. I'm going to take x plus 5, set that equal to 0. And then I get to solve both of these. So x plus 2, when x plus 2 equals 0, I would subtract 2 from both sides. I'm going to get x equals negative 2, because 0 minus 2 is negative 2. For x plus 5 equals 0, I would subtract 5 from both sides. I would get x equals negative 5. So my other 0 would be negative 5. That's it. So you factor, you set each of your factors equal to 0, and you solve each of them for x. When we have negatives involved, it's going to be a little bit more work on finding your factors. So let's look at that next one. We've got x squared minus 6x minus 16. We are trying to multiply to negative 16. We are trying to add together to be negative 6. What numbers when we are trying to multiply to a negative and add to be a negative? In order to multiply to a negative, we know we need one positive, one negative. Because we need to add to be a negative, we want our bigger one to be negative. So we're going to do one positive, one negative, make the bigger one negative. So when we're looking for our numbers that multiply to 16, you want to look for numbers that multiply to 16 and are 6 apart. So what multiplies to 16 and is 6 apart from each other? What multiplies to 16? Let's just start with that. 2 and 8. So 2 and 8 multiply to 16. And then they are 6 apart. So if we make the bigger one negative and the smaller one positive, then positive 2 and negative 8 add together to be negative 6. It's all just a puzzle. Okay. Then we can set each of those factors equal to 0. So x plus 2 equals 0, and x minus 8 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. We would subtract 2 from both sides. We get x equals negative 2.
Is it a
Odd
block?
block day, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. And then for x minus 8 equals 0, we will add 8 to both sides. And we'll get x equals positive 8. So sometimes both of our zeros will be negative, sometimes they'll both be positive, sometimes they'll be one positive, one negative. Kind of just depends on the problem. All right. Any questions about either of those? Okay, I'm going to pause for an intermission and pull up a calculator and prove to you that I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. I want to show you calculator wasn't loaded. This is the first class I've had today. On this one here, so x squared minus 6x minus 16, if I were to plug in negative 2 for x, so that would be negative 2 squared minus 6 times negative 2. Oop, that's going to give me the wrong answer there. I'm going to use this negative. Minus 16. I'm going to hit enter. Apparently I typed something wrong. Yes. I tried to use my keyboard instead of the buttons. That was not a good idea. Good eyes. So if I plug that in, I get 0. If I plug in 8 squared minus 6 times 8 minus 16, I'm also going to get 0. So if I were to plug in these two numbers, that's when, if I plug in those x values, my y value is 0. Just wanted to show you that. Okay? We've got 2 more problems to look at. Again, we are factoring and then setting each factor equal to 0 and solving. So next 2 we've got x squared minus 12x plus 20. What are we trying to multiply to be here? 20. Trying to multiply to 20. We are trying to add to be negative 12. Anytime we are trying to multiply to be positive and add to be a negative, what type of numbers do we want to use? Both negatives. Yep. So we need 2 numbers that are both negative, because a negative plus a negative will add to be negative, but a negative times a negative will multiply to be positive. So what numbers multiply together to be 20 and can add to be negative 12? Think about what numbers multiply to 20 and add to normal 12. 2 and 10, and then we just make them both negative. So x minus 2 and x minus 10. Okay, from there, I'm going to set x minus 2 equal to 0. I'm going to set x minus 10 equal to 0. We would like you guys to write down that your factors equal 0. You don't need to show your work for solving from there if you don't want to. We want you to recognize that the 0 factor property, that you can set each factor equal to 0, is a thing. But then from here, when is x minus 2 going to equal 0? For what x value? What number minus 2? 2, yeah. Okay, this one, what minus 10 equals 0? 10. So it's always going to be the same numbers but opposite. when you get to your zeros. So you can show all of your work for working those out if you would like to, but you do not have to. You do need to set them equal to 0 is the only thing. We want to see you setting them equal to 0. But past that, no worries. Okay, last one, x squared plus 5x minus 14. We are trying to multiply together to be negative 14. We are trying to add together to be 5. So since I need to multiply to be a negative number, I know it's going to be a 1 positive, 1 negative type of situation. What numbers multiply to 14 and are 5 apart from each other? Negative 2, positive 7. So x minus 2, x plus 7. So it's like solving a puzzle. So then we've got x minus 2 equals 0. X plus 7 equals 0. And then from there, that x minus 2, 2 minus 2 equals 0. So that's one of my zeros. And the other one, what number plus 7 equals 0? Negative 7. So it's those same numbers but opposite. So you do not need to write this add to this, multiply to this part. You don't need to write that part if you don't want to. You do need to have your factored version set equal to 0 and your 0. So these 1, 2, 3 things are the bare minimum of what you need to write down. Any questions right now? Okay. Let me find the button. I can't say the word button. Let me find the button to stop the recording. Bye, recording.